Welcome to Ninja Pulls. This is Khan, and we are going to talk damage in the Elder Scrolls Online. Specifically, how to break 100k DPS on any class. I've made written guides for all 14 classes with videos on the way, all with rotations that are easy to follow, ranging from 118k to 140k. So 100k is realistic for any player. Just follow the steps in this video and you will hit it. Trust me. And if you already have, watch it anyway and push higher, or try another class. You never know when the meta might shift. The three basic ingredients are setup, weaving, and rotation. Doesn't matter what you play, these are universal. Friendly reminder to subscribe if you like seeing this kind of content, or support the channel directly by becoming a member. That's ultimately what we need to keep doing this. But first, because this is the internet, there's some common sense stuff that I need to say. DPS is just a measurement, it's not the goal. Dummy numbers mean nothing if you die to AoEs or if you don't adjust for different encounters. 100k is just a nice round number, it's not a line which divides good from bad, and it's easier on some classes than on others, so don't get too hung up on it. Getting clears and having fun is what matters, but the higher your damage, the more clears and more fun you will have. That's the way this works. How you get there is up to you, not me. Pick a class and playstyle you enjoy, but don't for a moment think that the meta doesn't exist or that you can ignore it forever. Tanks must survive, healers must support, and DDs must kill enemies fast. The numbers don't lie, and the more advanced the content, the less wiggle room you're gonna have. First, build for damage. You will need heals and armor sometimes, and a more role-playing build can be fun in story content when everything's super easy, but our power budget is limited, so don't start with those considerations or your build will fundamentally fail. Start with damage, then introduce whatever else you need, keeping it to a minimum and sacrificing as little power as possible. That's honestly the best way to approach this game, and here's why. Look how bosses are designed in ESO. Massive health pools, and damage output which is tiny by comparison, even in trials. That tells us everything. The way to outvalue an enemy with hundreds of millions of hit points, but DPS in the thousands or tens of thousands, is to play offensively and control the fight. The more defensively we play, the more we lose the initiative and let them control us. This means we rarely put anything into health as damage dealers in PvE. PvP is different. For PvE, throw everything into your primary stat, Magicka or stamina, and don't waste valuable bar space on buffs or heals unless you need them. Spend your budget wisely. Try to get a trial set with Minor Slayer. It's not massively important, but it's free stats. Some are better than others. Riptide, Reliquant and Sul'Zan are the most favoured. Unsul, Whirl and Null Archer are good too, and Alkosh is very valuable. Others are either situational or geared towards something other than damage. Both 5-piece sets you choose will be stat sets or proc sets. Stat sets scale with your own performance. The better your rotation, the more damage you get from those stats. Proc sets kind of work the other way. They scale with your stats and activate automatically. So you can pause to play mechanics or res a teammate and the proc will still work. That's one reason why Pillar of Nirn is still so popular. It pops under the target, putting a dot on them no matter where they go or what you do in the meantime. Aegis Caller is a little stronger and bigger, but enemies can walk out of the AoE. There's usually some sort of trade-off like that. Read your tooltips and it will all make sense. The sheer number of sets in ESO can seem overwhelming, but it's all pretty simple really. If the stats look good, lots of damage stats, not health or recovery, they probably are good. And the strengths and drawbacks of a proc set are usually pretty easy to read from the tooltip. You generally want a 2-piece weapon set on the back bar. The Maelstrom two-handed, aka Merciless Charge, is great for most classes because it adds a little bonus to our direct damage. That's anything that isn't a dot. That means it also scales with our own performance. The better our rotation, the more we get out of this set. The other super popular option is the Maelstrom Destro Staff, Crushing Wall. Arcanists use this because their direct damage is limited, and the Maelstrom 2H doesn't work as well. But other classes use it too, in fights where Stampede is problematic, or where you can pre-place AoEs when the boss is spawning. Maelstrom Bow, Master's Bow, Black Rose Daggers are also in the mix for certain builds and situations. And you can even drop the weapon set and move the proc set to the back bar, making room for a monster set and a mythic. The most useful and popular mythics are the Kilt, Mage Amulet and Coil. Death Dealer's Fate is also a great mix of survivability and damage, while Pale Order can be ridiculously valuable in solo arenas. With 2 5-piece sets, plus a weapon set and a mythic, we can't run a 2-piece monster set. Slimecraw is the go-to 1-piece since that bonus is stronger than all the others, but it's good to have a Krag or a Scoria to hand if you're short of penetration. Again, always be tweaking. Some classes don't need the Kilt to reach the critical damage cap of 125%. Arcanists, for example, use Mage since it was literally made for them. Nightblades, Templars and Wardens can do the same, or use a monster set like Zaan or Selene. There's always flexibility, so give yourself a couple of different options. Same goes for weapons. I try to use whatever's statistically strongest, but if you want to use staves, mauls, fists, I don't care. If it works, your group shouldn't care either. Just make sure you understand the trade-offs. Some Magicka players prefer staves even though they're a little weaker. I get that, small DPS losses are usually okay. What they often don't realise is that taking stamina abilities out of the rotation makes it harder to sustain by-stat food or medium armour. It can break the build, and by the time you've made all the adjustments to get it working again, you've lost much more power and survivability than you expected. It's not about daggers versus staves, that's a silly debate. My mag characters use daggers and my stam characters use staves all the time. It's about being practical, not ideological. It's a game. Read your tooltips, talk to your group, and always make tweaks. Finally, champion points. Here are the greens and reds that work for most content. With the blues, you want the 2 that buff the majority of your damage. For most classes, that's direct and single target damage, so Master at Arms and Deadly Aim. For Arcanists, it's Biting Aura and Thaumaturge, and these can easily change if you tweak your setup, or even for different fights. Think of the other 2 CPs as flexible. Exploiter is great if you're setting enemies off balance on cooldown, but if that ain't happening, it's weak. Wrathful Strikes works unconditionally, but it's not that strong, so both of these can be swapped for things like Force of Nature if you're short of penetration, Backstabber and or Fighting Finesse if you're short on critical damage. If you're on PC, it's very easy to check these stats using combat metrics and make adjustments between fights. If you're starting to see a recurring pattern of building for damage and constantly tweaking your setup, that's not a coincidence. That's how the best players do it. There's no big secret. I think getting the build together is actually the most complicated part. It takes time and patience to understand all the various stats, buffs and debuffs, get a feel for the best sets, traits, enchantments and CPs. That's how deep combat systems work. They draw you into the game and reward you for it later. Light attack weaving is actually much easier to get to grips with, in my opinion. It has this intimidating reputation because it's not a super common game mechanic, and almost every player in ESO seems to have misunderstood it at some point, including me. The biggest myths about weaving are that it's difficult, that it has anything to do with animation cancelling, and that it's just for tryhards. All of these are wrong. Weaving is quick and easy to learn, and although mastering it does take time, it doesn't take that much skill. Animation cancelling is a thing in ESO, but with weaving it's more of a byproduct, it's not why we do it. And yes, the players who care most about the speed and consistency of their weaving are definitely the tryhards, but the players who benefit most from doing it are actually the more casual players, since light attacks make up a much larger proportion of their damage. Very briefly, here's how it works. In ESO, we can cast abilities once every second. There's a cooldown which stops you from going any faster. Light attacks don't share that cooldown, so we can continuously activate these alongside abilities every second. They deal a lot of damage while generating ultimate and activating weapon glyphs and other effects. If you're on PC, you can use add-ons like GC D-Bar or Combat Metronome to track that 1 second cooldown and follow that rhythm very precisely. It's not needed though, eventually your muscle memory will just do it automatically. Activate your light attacks just before the ability. We're talking milliseconds before, so the 2 button presses are almost simultaneous. Grab an Inferno Staff, slot Elemental Susceptibility, and you can practice this for hours if you want to. You can see the light attack shooting out, followed by the animation of the ability. It won't take long at all before this starts to feel smooth and natural. That's literally all there is to it. Pretty soon it doesn't even feel like 2 actions, but 1, and it's a way to pump out way more damage each second, each minute. And unless you somehow disagree that more damage is good, it therefore follows that light attack weaving is an integral part of being a damage dealer. If you're doing low stakes, easy content, then of course, you don't need to bother. You could grab Oakensol or Urmage and just chill. That could be nice, so long as you can switch it back on in content where damage matters. Where exactly you draw that line is kind of up to you, your group, and your raid lead. Once you start playing with properly organized guilds and prog groups, they will check logs, and if you're not pulling your weight, everyone will see it. Like I said at the beginning, the more advanced the content, the less wiggle room you have. Finally, we gotta get the rotation right or all our stats, sets, and fancy light attacks will be for nothing. I'll go into much more detail in class-specific videos which are coming up, but essentially there are 3 components. Dots, especially your primary dot, the weapon dot on your back bar which activates your weapon glyph, generally Stampede, Blockade, or Endless Hail. You want to recast this roughly when it runs out, but you can also recast it early or late if it helps the flow of your rotation. Treat your other dots in much the same way, this is just the most important one. Priority abilities. Every class has one. Fate Carver, Burning Talons, Blast Bones, Assassin's Will, Daedric Prey, Power of the Light, Subterranean Assault. They're not spams, but regular casts that are very strong and which we do not want to miss. My approach is almost always to build the rotation around these, giving it a built-in rhythm and structure, and making it much easier for our gamer brains to know instinctively where we are in our sequence of casts, without constantly staring at our ability bars. Finally, a spammable. Whatever gaps are left in the rotation, we want to fill by spamming these abilities. Dots make the layers in the cake, priority abilities give it a juicy filling, and spams are like the tasty topping. Just assemble your cake correctly, keep everything rolling, and the results will be delicious. That's how every rotation is fundamentally constructed. Sometimes all the timers line up perfectly, like my bow rotation for the Stamina Dragonknight, but generally there are inevitable gaps and downtimes in a static rotation. The more ambitious you are, the more you will need to optimize and the more dynamic your rotation will have to be. But if you're just looking to break 100k, a static rotation is more than enough. Of course, there's way more depth waiting in ESO's combat system for those who want it, but hopefully I've demystified some of the more fundamental stuff in a relatively short video. Now go put this into practice and let me know how you get on. All the setups and rotations are already on the Ninjapulse website. And like I said, I'm gonna get videos out for each one of them as quickly as I can. If you get stuck or want some feedback, join our Discord and post a CMX report in our Passes channel. We also get videos from console players now and again. It is a channel for teaching, not for flexing, so don't hold back if you think your DPS is low. I will personally take a look at it and find you some easy ways to improve. Unless of course you're already at the damage cap. We really want to get more ESO players doing trials. It is such a fantastic part of this game, and we're always interested in finding new people to raid with. Share this video with anyone who could use that kind of encouragement. Follow us on Twitch and stay tuned for the class videos. Thanks for watching.